Welcome, welcome. It is time for this week's CM World Thursday Conversations. Each week we're covering one track from Content Marketing World so you can watch the on-demand content and tune in while we take a deeper dive in with some of our speakers. This week we're covering the Content Distribution and Promotion track from Content Marketing World 2020. And I'm so happy to be joined by some great people, Ashley Zeckman from Imprella Communications, David Fortino from Netline, Inbar Yagur from Kiwi, and I'm ready to get started. This is going to be so much fun. So for those of you that have been tuning in, we're aiming for a fast-paced, informational, and fun 20 minutes. But we've been known to go 30 minutes because we get chatty sometimes. So let's get started. So a big thanks to all of you. And Peter Tarrant just joined us from Tipalti. So thank you for jumping in. We're so glad you're here. So this was a really fun one for me to watch. So Ashley, I'm just going to start with you because you and I have worked together and done some great things, and I've learned a lot from you over the years. So I know that you and I have worked together, and some of the things we were doing were, we know the formula, talking about scheduling, Gantt charts, all these different things. So what happens when you're trying to be a brand that's showing empathy and a pandemic hits? Like, how can you know the needs, how your customers need it, when they need it, and move quickly? And how do you kind of get over that hump, and how do you work with brands who just want and need results, especially right now?
Yes, such a big and important question. I think the thing about, the times that we're living in is, as a brand, you can't ignore it. You can't pretend that it doesn't impact your business, your customers. So simply doing nothing isn't an option. But then there's also brands that would share, support of things and share messaging and things like that, but weren't actually putting their money or their time where their mouth was. So in order to be effective, I think right now, you need to be very authentic. It's important more now than it ever has been before to show that empathy. One of the things that our team does is conducts what we call voice of customer research. So that means actually going to our clients' customers and identifying what the things are that they care about, what they need, what they're looking for in a partner, and going straight to the source versus guessing. Creating personas based on our gut feel versus what people are actually telling us they need and want.
I thought about that. I was thinking about when everything hit in March and when things happened over the summer. Our Twitter chats, for example, we stopped for a minute, and then we ended up doing 5 days of Twitter chats just to kind of figure out what our customers needed. Ginny Dietrich did her My Hot Mess blog series just to get people to kind of understand that we're all kind of navigating this together. And I just thought, we're still producing content, we're still doing these things, but what we're doing normally just doesn't make sense sometimes.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think now more than ever is just the time to be human, right? I think about the people that are putting themselves out there as marketers personally. Katie Martell, Andrew Davis, the types of video content that they're creating that are so authentically them just makes you love them that much more, right? So since, we weren't able to be together at Content Marketing World this year, we're craving that interaction, that, real authentic experience as people, no matter what our role is and no matter what we do. And I love the people that are just really being so themselves.
Mm-hmm. So David and Peter, we love empathetic content. We love being the voice, so, listening and doing all these things. But I know one thing that I also love is analytics. So how can you bridge that gap between, what you're doing and how you're looking at these numbers and making sure that you're still not producing content just for the number's sake?
Sure. And Peter, chime in. And that's I think a good point of reference, actually, how he and I work together. So from our side, Netline's in the position of helping marketers, B2B marketers specifically, translate their existing content into business outcomes, ultimately via lead gen. And so a key deliverable on our side is not just to drive engagement with their content, but more specifically, leverage that content to not only yield leads, but that are presented in a way beyond just raw data, right? Data doesn't really allow you to not only inform your own decision making and education around what's happening with your content, but presenting it in a visualized format allows you to really unearth stories, not only for yourself, also your peers, your superiors, and so on. And so we've kind of allowed our customers to do that quite easily. Peter can chime in there, but we've also, throughout this period, created a product that allows B2B marketers to effortlessly and in an ungated fashion and without even paying us, the ability to run analytics around B2B content consumption and trends using a product that's on our site called Audience Explorer. Um, you're free to go there and look at content consumption behavior that's occurring across the web. And that really allows you to unearth stories that are happening in the marketplace without you really only relying on your own data to inform those kind of third party and peripheral observations.
Yeah, absolutely, and I can follow that up from the provider side of the content. Our audience hasn't changed too much in this current time, but the content that we do promote has. We have a very popular piece now that's all about pandemic recovery. We sell to CFOs, so a lot of their processes have changed, and in any industry, processes are changing with people being and not traveling for business and so on and so forth. But our content has changed, our audience has not, but the ways that we're selling and getting in front of our target audience is always adapting. So more of the personal touch once we do get the high quality MQL leads pushed over to us from Netline. We have a different nurture track where we're sending direct mail, we're sending gifts, we're definitely showing more empathy towards their current situation, and just realizing that we have to adapt.
Inbar, I was, one of the things I loved about your whole entire presentation was, first of all, the biggest takeaway was that people that buy candy corn are insane. I started laughing at that because that was hilarious. I seriously wrote that down. But I really love the idea of content sequencing, and I think that versus just retargeting. We're so used to being blasted by Googling something and then seeing it for the next 30 days, and you're like, I already bought it. Blasting us with useful content and things that'll increase consumption, close that consumption gap, and all these different things makes such for a better experience. How have you seen that work for you and your brands?
Well, I think it's kind of cool because not only do I see what we do at Kiwi as a marketing team, I also see other marketing teams and how they work to kind of drive performance. And I think in general, first of all, I look at all content as performance marketing. Like, just because it's content doesn't mean that you shouldn't tie business goals to it. And the way to do it is just to really just think about the levels of engagement and kind of what you want and what you want to expect from the user at any given point in time, right? So, and this goes especially if you're doing like B2B or anything with a long sales cycle, right? It's almost impossible to tie that original piece of content to the end. But if you structure it in a way that's kind of gradual, and if you manage to stick your content in buckets, this is top funnel, this is mid funnel, this is bottom funnel, then you can then really start looking at how you drive results from one thing to the next. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. I'd love to hear what anyone else thinks about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think from our side, we pride ourselves on our ability to have attributable or attribution-rich deliverables to our customers, right? And Peter's a testament to that. We don't really exist in the marketplace unless we're delivering true ROI and results that are completely measurable through only B2B sales processes, which are always long, regardless of what space that client might be in. But those same exact rules apply to us as a corporate marketing team too. And so, we don't create really any content that is just solely for the purpose of looking at vanity metrics. We really don't, as a team, even look at those numbers. Like, they're not important. They're not interesting to us. There's certainly businesses out there that those metrics are important. So, for them, disregard what I'm saying. But for us, they're just not a focal point for any of us. And so everything's about translating content into dialogue, which develops pipeline and ultimately one business. If it's not serving that continuum somewhere along the way, then we need to ask ourselves why we're doing it. And that's really the basis for our approach to anything that we create.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of.
Go ahead, Inbar. No, you go ahead.
No, I think just a lot of times, like in content teams, people tend to just like, let's throw pasta at the fridge and see what sticks, right? And at the end of the day, like you need to take some sort of measurable approach to it. Obviously, like you want to start, okay, I'm going to do content, but think about that content, right? What is the value that you as a company give to the user, and then how can you project that value in a way that brings the user down the funnel? Right. So you introduce the concept, you dig deeper into the concept, then you explain why that concept is relevant to what you do for the customer.
That's a big point
And
there about what you said of think about what you give to the customer, right? There's part of that obviously touches into empathy. Part of that is the notion that your customer or prospect at that point should feel that this is an equitable exchange, right? That they're giving you their time. In most cases, if you're doing it right, you're trying to solicit some first party data. And so they're giving you that data too. And there better be an experience that the customer or prospect feels like it was worth their time or the privilege of sharing their first party data with you. And so a lot of marketers get fixated in that machine of creating content and not really thinking about the opposite side of what would be the interpretation of this content versus like how does my sales team view this content? It's really, ultimately how the prospect would receive that content.
can I say a word about data too? I think that, I think obviously we need to measure and we need to constantly be looking at how we're doing in terms of numbers. But I think something that kind of gets lost along the way when we start breaking down our efforts into numbers is that every single number, there's a human behind that making a decision, right? A click is a human deciding to interact with something based on what you showed them, right? A conversion is a human being saying, okay, I'm willing to give you of my time, of my money. And especially when you get into bigger numbers, but I think this is true for everything, right? Every click is a human making a decision. And it's really hard to kind of think about that. It can get lost when you start fixating on numbers. And I think it's always kind of a challenge to keep both of those things kind of in a good tension with a good focus. Yes, data is important, measurement is important, but the human element is what drives all of it.
Well, I was going to, Chris Lukey from Rockwell, who was going to join us today, but he couldn't. One of the things he talked about was the podcast he works on. I found very, very, a lot of, I don't know if that's works now.
I thought that was just my computer.
It's your computer? Oh, I know.
I thought it was just me, not yours, right?
But what he said from his podcast standpoint is he wants to know what's important to him, what he's curious about. But more importantly, he needs to make sure that aligns with what his audience is curious about. So where I was going with that was, Ashley, when you're doing things, you're creating this piece of content. And a big part of Chris's presentation was all about repurposing his podcast. And a lot of the things that we're doing involve, turning it into videograms, turning it into blog posts, turning it into images and things like that. And when you're producing that piece and you want to take it when you're done and do all these things with it, do you have a plan of, okay, I know that this group wants to see it this way. Here's where we have a lot of people on LinkedIn who like to digest our content, so I'm going to make it into short videos. Do you do that before you produce a piece of content? Like you have your checklist of how you want it to flow? Or do you do it and then okay, I can take this, this, and this, and this from it?
Yeah, so I think one of the things that we find more times than not is that you have, whether you're a large organization or a small one, you have all of these different departments with competing priorities, topics, things they want to talk about. And so what we like to do at the very beginning of a program, be it a pilot program, a campaign, or a long-term ongoing program, is put together that content architecture. And the way that looks is in a phased approach. What is the intent of each piece of content? How does it connect with the next piece of content? How do you and how do you repurpose it as well? And I think I'd love to have a plan at the very beginning for that architecture for repurposing, knowing that we are going to have to optimize based on what we publish in phase one, right? So we have a loose plan of where we think we can repurpose and how we think we can do it. But ultimately, we want to be looking at that data from the first phase to identify what did people engage with the most, where did we get the most clicks, the most likes, some of those vanity metrics, but then other types of engagements as well, conversion, whatever it is, depending on what platform you're on. So I think it's always good to plan from the beginning, but know that you're going to have to optimize your approach based on the results of the first phase.
Right. Those plans being fluid is pretty critical. I mean, how many times have we ever actually gone from the beginning to the end and not changed our plan 10 times along the way? But that plan helps us figure out how to go, where to go. Anyone have anything else to add on that?
Yeah, I think I'd add to that. Oh, you can go, Peter.
This is maybe revisiting the last topic, but one thing that I wrote down that I want to start tracking and have UTMs around is we obviously have pieces that are more thought leadership versus ones that are more on the sales side. And I want to start tracking our different lead sources and see if there's a differentiator between the ones where we're getting more high quality leads from the thought leadership pieces versus the more salesy pieces. Because obviously we have like top of the funnel, middle funnel, bottom funnel, and certain tracking for what use case of our sales product that the piece is relevant to, but I don't have any tracking for thought leadership versus more of the salesy pieces, and that's something that I would love to start tracking.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think the more nuance we can all dive into, the better, not only rich data that you have access to, but the more informed we can all be in making decisions, right? So I think that makes a ton of sense. And I don't know if we ever get to a point where we stop wanting to dig deeper. Maybe that's always a risk, right? We always get so deep into data that maybe we lose track of, bigger picture views at some point, but that's always a struggle, I think, for all of us.
Well, I think just making sure we know that if we're diving deeper and we're trying to find something that we actually can do something with the data that we're looking for, and not just, I know that we're very fortunate at the companies where we're at is that we are very fortunate because we have a ton of data, and you can do something with it, or you can just sit there and just keep looking at it and figuring out how to make it better, how to do more, and not actually taking action and doing better content with it. So.
I think it's also a question of like there's a lot of white noise you have to dig through regardless, right? Like if something isn't statistically significant, then there's no point in getting down to it, right? If you're doing like account-based marketing and using content to empower that, then yeah, you can look at double digits, single digits, triple digits, and it'll make sense. But if you're talking on scales of thousands, like it can be really easy to go down these like rabbit holes of like these little tiny numbers. Well, these 3 people did this action, maybe that's something, but it's probably not, right? Obviously it's a question of scale, but it's really, really important to remember to keep scale and proportion and not get lost in like the little minutia of it.
For sure.
I think, sorry, go ahead, Cathy.
No, please.
I was gonna say, I wouldn't be me if I didn't, of course, bring up the concept of integrating influencers into your B2B marketing, right? And I know that especially is because it's so new, an area where there's so much focus on those vanity metrics. So what's the reach, how many shares, all of that. But I think where we're all still, falling down short a little bit is understanding the intersection of your brand, the influencers you work with, and the people that are actually buying, right? So we know that influencers influence buying decisions, but I think we're still having a hard time as an industry identifying like what is that number that we can attribute to influencer marketing success? Like who are the people actually buying based on this work we're doing? So I think that's an area in this year, next year, and the following year, we're going to get better and better at identifying those data points and how they really impact the business and kind of serve all purposes, right? Serve the influencers, serve the buyers, and serve the brand.
Are there any tools that are really starting to crack that nut?
There's not a one size fits all tool, especially in B2B. I think most of the platforms are more B2C focused. You can still extract data from them, but a lot of what I've had to do is sort of trick the tool into reporting certain things that I want it to by creating some custom reports. We use Tracker as an organization. We've also used Analytica in the past. And, I'm sure Chris Penn will crack this code before anyone else and is probably already working on a platform. But I think we'll get there. But right now, it's still a lot of cobbling it together between, these tools and Google Analytics and like you guys were talking about, using the right UTM codes for tracking purposes, it's still needing to be cobbled together to really show this story. So we're not there yet.
But it sounds like you've got your system though, and it's working for you right now. And
Yep.
That's really what you need, right?
Yep, exactly.
So just going off of the whole theme of this track, content distribution and promotion, what's something that each of you are doing that is helping you build trust with your customers right now through your content distribution? Ashley, you're nodding. I'm going to start with you.
Okay, I was nodding, waiting for someone else to answer while I was thinking. You caught me. I think with our own customers, we are a very consultative agency, and we're very adaptable. Knowing too that a lot of our clients, especially in healthcare, are very reliant on the news cycle. I think our ability to be super agile in our approach and pick up the things when they need us to is important. One of the things that we are doing for our clients on behalf of their, for their customers, is featuring more customer stories that are real, that are raw, that are not super scripted, that tell real stories of real people and, how the pandemic has impacted them, the things that they're learning, the things they're interested in, and really trying to focus less on brand stories and more on customer stories in a variety of different forms. So is that long form social? Is that video? Is that, podcast series? Just trying to find the way to meet the customers where they're at with the stories that they feel connected to.
Yeah, that's a good one. We mirror that. I think our channels are a little bit different, but in terms of leaning into kind of customer-centric narratives and investing in our customers at a person level, we tend to invite customers into a marketer showcase type of deployment where they can talk about whatever they want. Has nothing to do with Netline, has nothing to do with their relationship with us or their outcomes with us. And then it goes from there. I think the only additional element that we really have tried to focus on is giving back, right? And again, kind of sprinkling back references to empathy and thinking about what they receive. That's really been about the creation of tools and creation of content that is not about Netline at all. It's about trying to arm marketers in their future successes using content as a way to educate themselves. And so if we're able to build trust there and confidence by using us as a way to get better at their job, there's that much more likelihood that they will have a dialogue with us when they're ready. It is a bit of a long game, right? And it's not directly feeding pipeline. So there's that balance as to how we deal with that and everybody else has to deal with that too.
For sure.
By the way, I think you just saw my 7-year-old run behind me on screen. This is talking about being messy, right? This is where we are. I really like. I think I mentioned this before we went live, right? Like I don't use Zoom backgrounds. I don't do anything. I show the mess, and we've been kind of doing that at Kiwi too, right? So one of the things that kind of I think happened in March, back like last March, when all this kind of everything just kind of the bottom dropped out, right? Nobody knew what to do, right? Everybody wanted to know is what is everybody else doing, right? Like, okay, I get what my situation is, but am I alone in this? Right? Is everybody else suffering the same thing I'm suffering? What's happening on like a broader level, right? And especially I think this is true for B2B marketing, right? If you've got a product, you are the expert in your field, right? You don't only see yourself, you see every single one of your users. And what every single one of your users wants to do is find out what everybody else is doing, right? Because they want to feel like they're doing okay, right? And so that data, sharing that over time not only helps you establish trust, but is also it's filling a really concrete need that just got amplified because of the pandemic. But I think it's always been there. You always want to know what everybody else is doing, right? And so that's what we did. We basically like what started in end of March. I started sending out a weekly email to all of our email list, and it was this long form. Like it was if I was in 1,000 words, that was the short version. And it really clearly outlined with charts and data what was happening everywhere. What were all of Kiwi's customers seeing? What were they experiencing? What was working? What wasn't working? And I did that consistently for 6 months. And that actually brought in quite a bit of new business, even in a very challenging kind of environment, because that's what people want to know. They want to know what everybody else is doing.
I think that brands, B2B brands in particular now are experiencing what B2C brands did a few years ago, where people want to buy from brands that stand for something, right? So, you know, you've seen, especially like in manufacturing over the past few years, you know, those that use recycled goods and those that support certain causes are the types of brands that people are engaging with and seeking. And the same is on the B2B side. Even if you're a B2B software company, you know, people want to buy from those brands that they feel like really stand for something. I think it can be tough because you could lose potential customers if you go too full force with your message. But in addition to that, like, everyone wants to know what everyone's doing. Everyone wants to know what the people they do business with stand for. Right. And I think that's something that we're just going to see more and more as this transpires.
Yeah, and I think that's
this year, you know, or last year, you know, and David could probably speak to more of this, but, you know, at our event, like our sponsors are in the expo hall and people are walking by and they're getting to talk face to face. And there's that personal connection, that instant connection where you're actually spending time with someone versus doing a demo online or whatever. And this past year, we've had to find something else to cling on to. And I think that, what do you stand for? What do you believe in? How can I relate to you? And, you know, do I trust you? I think that's come out more than the past 12 months, just because, you know, that's just one more way we can get connected to our customers.
Yeah, that's huge. And I wish I had like a moment or a point of wisdom here to share. I don't. You know, I think we've all been struggling with how do we create personal connections when there's only a flat screen in front of us that we're, you know, all visually looking at each other and interacting, but it's just not the same. Yeah, I think we've definitely leaned into any video related content as a way to create dialogue. Obviously, I think majority of the world has done that. But it's not the same. And I think feeling you know, the reality of that is normal, and struggling with that is normal. You're in it with all of us. And I don't know, you know, what the solution theoretically is, aside from just trying your best and getting back to everyone's tone of creating an empathetic voice from your brand. But I think more importantly, it's establishing that personal relationship, right? It's about you as a marketing leader, you know, communicating that personal tone and trust with your prospects.
Peter, for your brand, how have you dealt with this? You know, just being the product that you are.
Yeah, I mean, on the I do account-based marketing, and we have a 98% retention rate. So I do not do too much with customer ABM, as I know some bigger companies do. But that is going to change as we continue to grow. So if anyone wants to meet the customer marketer behind our 98% retention rate, I'm happy to make an introduction. But one of the things that we're doing on the ABM side is instead of having our event budget going to in-person sort of events, each sales team each quarter has a couple $1,000 budget to host any sort of event, come up with a specific, you know, direct mail bundle. But a lot of them are going with the video in-person sort of events. So like this quarter, a couple sales teams are doing bourbon tastings. There's wine tastings going on. So just things that can get that more intimate sort of engagement between the sales reps and also our top target prospects with open opportunities has been awesome and has proven great ROI so far.
That's awesome. Well, it is 1:30, and I told you we take less than a half hour. So, David, I know you need to jump first. You just want to tell everyone how they can get a hold of you?
Yeah, email's fine, david@netline.com. You can hit me up through the site, LinkedIn, Twitter. I believe my Twitter is already added over here on the chat. So I'm open to all channels, whatever you want.
Awesome. I'm just going to go right across. Ashley, you're next and on my screen.
Oh, how to get a hold of me? Sorry. I was distracted by listening to his information. So you can find me on LinkedIn or email me at ashley@imprella.com, or my Twitter is @azeckman. And I always love to meet and engage with new smart people. So hit me up.
Awesome. Inbar?
I am very bad at Twitter. Very bad at Twitter, but I do have an account, content_fairies, so you can DM me there. I'm a little better at LinkedIn, so you can just do a search for my name, find me there. And in general, my work email is inbar@kiwi.co. Now, Kiwi is spelled a little weird. It's KEYWEE. So inbarkiwi.co. Always happy to hear from everybody.
Awesome.
And you know, I may be terrible at Twitter, but you can still reach me there.
You'll get it eventually. Last but not least.
You can find me on MySpace. No, just kidding. I do have a Twitter, not for business purposes, to follow interesting accounts. So no need in sharing that. But peter.tarrant@tipalti.com or Peter Tarrant on LinkedIn. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. And if you're, for those of you in the Facebook group right now watching this, there's Monina Wagner, who's our awesome community manager, put all of your information in the chat. So, and if anyone has any more questions we didn't answer, please feel free to leave them in the chat. These people are all in the group, obviously, and they'll be happy to get back to you and answer any of your questions. And if you haven't watched their sessions and you're watching this, you missed out. So go back and watch their sessions. So we are taking a break next week from Thursday Conversations, but we will see you in 2 weeks where we start talking about some creative things. Visual storytelling is up next. So thank you everyone so much. It was
Thank
so good to see all of you, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye.